researchers that there is a secret government within our government. While that may be hard to believe coming from the UFO perspective, we've certainly learned in Watergate and the Iran-Contra scandal that factions within our government can and do pursue their own hidden agendas outside of the law, outside the control of Congress, or the knowledge of the American people. This is exactly the type of operation we'll hear about tonight. It's a chilling scenario with worldwide implications that may have its roots right here.
Welcome everybody back to the Common Anomaly podcast. I'm your host Stuart James and we're back for episode number 7. Joining me back in the studio again today, Clayton James. How's it going?
Good. It's going great. Thanks again for having me back.
No problem. I'm really excited about today's episode. We've got a really interesting topic which we're going to reveal to everyone in a minute. But I think it's probably fair to say at this point you're like co-host more than guest, aren't you?
I prefer to think of myself as friend of the show.
Friend of the show is good. No pressure. But the co-host role is open. I mean, you're on the show so frequently. I think it's 7 episodes and you've done 3 of them. So
my people will call it your people.
Okay, well, let's reveal today's topic for the show. Very excited about this one. So I thought I would follow off on episode number 6. We talked about Jacob Barber. This is the most recent UFO whistleblower on the scene. And that got me thinking, I really want to go back in time to, at least in my life experience, the original UFO whistleblower, and that is Robert Lazar, better known as Bob Lazar. So what do you think about that? Just off the top of your head, how do you feel about Bob Lazar? What do you know about him?
Well, I'll tell you what. I have been on a journey this past week.
Okay.
Because I think you pitched this idea to me on, I think it was Friday last week. And initially I got really excited about it because I thought, oh, Bob Lazar, yeah, I've heard of him. I know some stuff about him. I've seen some clips. I've seen a few interviews with him. Yeah, it's interesting. And then, throughout the week, I wanted to be prepared, so I was doing some research, and I went so back and forth on the guy. It's such a compelling story.
He's very controversial.
It's such a compelling story, and I always want to look at both angles of it. And I went so back and forth. I think it was Monday night. I was thinking, I don't know if maybe I should, text Stuart, tell him to maybe find someone else to do this episode with him, because I don't know. If
that's just because you feel like you didn't believe his story.
I don't know if I believe a word this guy is saying.
That's good though. We're not here to peddle bullshit. So if you feel like something's bullshit, I think you should say so.
But the more I looked into it, because I was having so much doubt about it, the more I looked into it, the more back and forth I went on it. And right now, gut feeling, I'm firmly on the fence about
okay.
About Bob Lazar.
Well, let's see if that changes through our discussion. So if there's any people out in the dark who have no idea who we're talking about, we're gonna go into probably a lot of detail in different aspects of Bob's story, but just a summation if you're out there thinking I've never heard of this fellow. Bob Lazar came out in 1989 or is it 1990? I can't remember.
It was
89. It was 89. He came forward out of the blue and he approached George Knapp of Las Vegas evening news broadcast, and he revealed himself as an employee of S4, which is a subset of what is famously known as Area 51, and he claimed that they had recovered alien spacecraft on the base, and that he was part of a reverse engineering program working on propulsion systems. So in a nutshell, that's his story. And he's a very compelling character. Is a really interesting story. I've been a fan of his tale since I don't know, I was 10 years old, and I wouldn't have been. Yeah, I think probably the first I ever heard of Bob Lazar was on the program Unsolved Mysteries. Do you remember Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been rebooted recently, but on Netflix.
It's probably not as good.
No, I doubt it's as good. I haven't watched any of it. I don't want to throw out shade or anything, but that's I have a very clear memory of sitting on our living room floor, being maybe 10 or 11 years old, and seeing that episode come up and hearing his story for the first time, which I think would have been a few years after the fact. But I think that's the first time I ever heard it. And I've followed his story closely ever since, which it really hasn't changed much. And so for me, that's one of the things that lends to credibility, is that, there's a lot of whistleblowers out there. And a lot of them, their stories evolve and get more elaborate and more crazy as time goes on.
Yeah,
and it just seems like they're out to seek attention. Whereas he has remained remarkably consistent.
Yeah, he's been very consistent. And, I heard about Bob Lazar more recently. I think probably about 20 years ago. God, I feel old. Yeah, I was, when I was about, I guess it wasn't quite 20 years ago, but almost. I guess when I was about 20, I was working at a call center, and I'd work overnights a lot. And, you had slow nights, you had busy nights. The slow nights were really slow.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'd get one phone call the whole night. So there was not much to do. I'd read, I'd play video games, I'd listen to the radio. And one of the things I listened to was Coast to Coast AM.
All right, yeah.
I'd listen to that a lot on that overnight shift. And
George Norrie.
I
met him. I met him at Paradigm Symposium. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I remember you telling me you met George Norrie.
Yeah.
George Norrie was hosting when I was listening to Coast to Coast. Before that, it was Art Bell. Apparently, Art Bell did an interview with Bob Lazar. This was well before I was listening to it, but it was something that kept coming up. There was he was always being referenced.
Mm-hmm.
He was this character whose story was always being referenced constantly on Coast to Coast. And, I heard a bit more of it in bits and pieces over the 2 decades since then. Seen a bit of him on Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Got a few documentaries about him. And it's a captivating story.
Yeah. Well, and to get into that to a little more detail, so let's flush out his story a little bit. So he was recruited. I think he was currently working at Los Alamos, so he says he was an employee working at Los Alamos, and was recruited by a company called EG&G, which I think is like an airline company, which is kind of a front. They run the Janet flights that fly out to Area 51. So that's where he says he got interviewed and basically recruited. And it was shortly after he was in the news. He was in the local news a lot. He was living in Las Vegas, and he had built like a rocket car or something.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to bring up the rocket car.
Well, it's interesting, right? It's an interesting factoid. So he's working at Los Alamos. He was supposedly... if his story is true, which we'll talk about later, he was at Caltech. He was at MIT. Pretty smart guy, into propulsion, into fireworks, blowing stuff up. That sort of thing was his bag. And I forget how he ended up getting connected, but he ended up connecting to someone who got him this interview, and he didn't know what it was for.
Well, what got him connected, according to him.
Okay, you got notes here. Yeah.
It was the rocket car.
It was the rocket car. Yeah, right. Because he did reference that. It was in the newspaper, and then supposedly that's what got the attention of whatever shadowy agency hired him onto this program.
And surprisingly, you hear me mention rocket car.
Yeah.
That is one of the pieces of his story that is actually verifiably true.
Totally, absolutely. It's 100% verifiable. Yeah. And actually there's a video I don't know if you found this in your research this week, but there's a great video of him that's, I think, from another news story that's well before, I think, his time, before any of these events, Area 51, transpired, of him building a hydrogen-powered car. Or actually, it might be much later. I can't remember. I actually I didn't go back and watch it this week in my research, but I've seen it a couple times just over the years, and it's really fascinating. So one thing I will say about this guy, because there's definitely a lot of question marks about his credentials.
Yes.
Because supposedly when he came out as a whistleblower, he was unpersoned, and all his credentials were expunged by shadowy government agencies who wanted to discredit him. So we'll discuss that in a little bit, whether we think his credentials hold up or not. But just watching him talk through himself on his own steam building a hydrogen-powered vehicle, he's no slouch. He's a smart guy. He obviously knows physics. He obviously knows combustion and chemistry very well. So
and one of the other positively verifiable parts of his story is he did work at Los Alamos.
Right.
And they don't let just anyone work at Los Alamos.
That's right. And so, and I mean, when I look at his story, before we go deeper into how his story unfolds, sometimes geniuses don't succeed well academically. And he's very careful. I've noticed when he states in interviews, when people ask him, like, did you attend? And he's always like, yes, I attended classes at MIT. I attended classes at Caltech. He's very careful not to state I graduated from, I obtained a degree at. So, and like his high school GPAs and stuff, like, he did not do well in school, but neither did Einstein. Just because you're not academically successful doesn't necessarily mean you're a dum-dum. Like, smarts come out in other ways, right?
Right.
Or intelligence presents sometimes outside of academia. And it sounds like, that might have been the ticket. And it doesn't sound like, from when he tells the story, he was only at S4, Area 51, he claims, for about 6 months. Yeah. And he was recruited because he was filling the position of someone who had died on the job, so conducting some kind of test, killed. So he was a replacement lab partner for someone else. It's not like he was a director of the program or anything. It sounds like he was a new entry. So he probably just got recruited into this in a very low-level position.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he was doing anything that high level there. But he
just had the opportunity to be exposed to this really exotic.
He had the opportunity to see a great deal, and actually we can get into that a bit about the person he was replacing.
Oh yeah, you got some stuff on that.
Kind of as we get a little bit further into the story.
Okay.
It's interesting what he had to say about the person he was replacing.
Right. Okay. All right. I might have missed that in my research. I just caught that. Yeah, it's like he was called in to replace someone who had been killed, and he was the new lab partner of Barry, who sounds like he was a entrenched kind of member of this team. But anyway, so where are we at? So he builds a rocket car. He's a pretty smart guy. He gets recruited into this job. He's shown some briefings. So a lot of what he says are briefings that he was read as he was being inducted into this program. So he does talk about things he read in the briefing, but he's very careful through the telling of his story to say what is something is a document I read and what is something I experienced personally, which I really appreciate. He's very good at drawing those distinctions of, I saw this myself and I just read this on a page I was given. I can't verify that for myself. But anyway, so that's where we're at. He's been recruited. He starts working at S4. And by the way, at this point, he's married and
Yes.
he's not allowed to tell friends, family, anything about what he's doing. And they're very weird hours. He gets a phone call in the middle of the night, and then he has to go and maybe spend a couple days working at S4 at the Parapost Lake facility near Area 51. And he's taken in, given a security pass, and he's introduced to hangar bays, which contain what he says are 9 different versions of alien extraterrestrial spacecraft in possession of the U.S. government. And he's introduced to his lab partner, Barry, and they're tasked with trying to reverse engineer the reactor and propulsion system of a particular spacecraft.
Yeah, and I mean, his cited reason that they brought him into this project, working at Los Alamos and, a bit of a hobbyist himself, he builds this rocket car.
Yeah.
He customizes his I forget what kind of car it was exactly, but he straps a jet engine to it.
Yeah.
And he can drive this car at 200 miles per hour, and he drives to work in it.
Yeah.
And he becomes kind of a local celebrity that way.
Right.
And this is what makes it one of the verifiable parts of the stories. It's in all the newspapers of the day.
That news article exists, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's before
And,
any of this happened, yeah.
Apparently that's what made them think of him. Like, this is a guy who knows propulsion and thinks outside the box.
Yeah.
And isn't afraid of taking a few risks.
Yeah.
This is why we're going to approach him.
Which to me scans. I don't know how you feel about that, but that makes sense to me. And I think a lot of people look at his story and go, well, this guy, it's not like he's the top of his field. Like, why would he get chosen to be brought into this? And it's like, what if he was just the next kind of guy in line, that they could throw at this, and maybe he gets killed in an experiment as well, trying to tinker with a power source that we know nothing about. And yeah, someone just took a shot and it was like, hey, I saw this guy in the newspaper. Seems pretty smart, likes to blow stuff up. Let's throw him at it, right?
And it's dangerous work, and this guy is not that high level. And he's an out-of-the-box thinker, and clearly he's a risk taker.
Yeah.
It's dangerous work. What he was told about the lab partner he was replacing was that he was replacing one of 2 people that were killed while they were trying to actually open up the reactor.
Yeah,
of one
yeah,
of
they were
these
trying
ships.
to cut it open with a blowtorch or something.
And cut it open with a blowtorch, and the reactor exploded, with the force of a tactical nuclear warhead,
Yeah,
and it was covered up in the media.
yeah.
It was covered up.
Well, that's
as
why
a,
they do these things
as-
out in at that test range, is
And
because it's
and it was
that's
covered
where
up
they blow up nukes, right?
as an unannounced nuclear test.
Yeah.
And that's the story. That's the cover story. they
So
told.
did you do that research? Were you able to pinpoint
No.
that nuclear blast?
No, because
Verify it? I did not go into that kind of detail.
Bob is never specific on the date of this supposed unscheduled nuclear blast.
Yeah. Well, you would have to assume it was sometime prior to the 6 months he was there. So you're probably looking at I don't know how long Barry was without a lab partner, but you're probably looking at a window of just 1 or 2 years when that could have happened.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone's done that research. I should have been more prepared.
I mean, there's so much to get into. Like,
There's so many angles.
I've
There's
been
so many
deep
angles.
into this all week, and
Yeah, me too.
I still feel unprepared to talk about
Me
it.
too. I wanted to do a lot more. But yeah, it's like, and I'll just say this as a little tangent. Folks, I am thinking about switching to a bi-weekly model because it is a real grind trying to get an episode together every week. I have a regular job, you have a regular job, and we both have lives. And yeah, it is actually a lot of work throughout the week to try and put an episode together. You wouldn't think just gabbing for an hour. It would be so much prep work in advance, but it really is. And I do want to focus on improving the quality of the show and just taking a little more time to be able to let things fully bake and to polish the episodes and get all the material together. I think it would be a benefit for longevity and for quality. So just throwing that out there. It's something I'm thinking about. But anyway, I digress. Yes, basically my research this week was coming home after work and watching documentaries, interviews, old episodes of Unsolved Mysteries until I fall asleep. That's basically the research I was doing this week. I did do some searching. I did actually do some online digging. I forgot to pull up any tabs before we started recording. We're recording Friday night, by the way. Just I picked up Clayton after work. We drove straight home to start recording. So I didn't prepare any of my tabs, but I actually did go and look at some stuff, and I pulled up the United Nuclear website.
Yes.
Did you go check it out?
Yes. I wanted to talk.
Do you want to talk about that?
United Nuclear.
So that is Bob Lazar's current business post his life doing this. He's actually a bit of a recluse. He's hard to get out for interviews. It seems like only for very specific people is he willing to talk to anybody these days, which is another note I find to his credit. He is not trying to overcapitalize on his story and really hasn't too much since coming out. But anyway, he runs a business which is all kind of lab equipment, supplies and stuff.
Did you know you can buy uranium ore on the internet?
Totally. I did not know
Bob
that.
Lazar sells it?
Yeah. Totally. Well, and it doesn't seem like anything nefarious. It's just something he sells as, obviously. He's marketing equipment and supplies to people who do chemistry and other scientific research and that sort of thing. He does have a little tab, Area 51, on his website,
Yeah.
which is like T-shirts, his autobiography, merchandise, that sort of thing, which I don't fault him for. Honestly,
Yeah,
he would be a little stupid for not doing that if that wasn't there.
You can get a print of his schematic diagram of the alien craft he supposedly worked on. You can get it signed by him for a little more.
Did you buy anything?
Oh my goodness, no! I can't afford Bob Lazar's signature.
He doesn't charge anything for the signature. I bought his autobiography and a coffee mug. Yeah, I was hoping they'd arrive before today, but they didn't. And you know what else I did? I invited him to come on the show.
And he said no.
I got a surprise for you. I never heard back. Which I didn't expect to, you know. I didn't expect I'd hear anything back, but I thought there's no harm in it. I'll give this a shot. The worst case is he says no or I hear nothing. And that's exactly what happened. But I was thinking about the future, right? We're a very small show right now, but maybe 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, I'm still doing this and have a bigger following. Who knows? Maybe he says yes the 20th time I ask.
On the subject of United Nuclear, Bob Lazar's business. And Bob, if you're listening, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little critical here.
Uh-oh.
Okay, I said I can't afford Bob Lazar's signature, which is one thing. It also doesn't look like a site I would trust ordering anything off of, because that website is stuck in the late 90s.
Yeah, it's very out of date.
You know how Craigslist, they haven't changed the layout of their website in 30 years?
Yeah.
Bob Lazar's site looks
like that.
kind of like that.
All black with like neon green lines on it.
It looks like if you click on it, like, this is a place I shouldn't be. I feel like my computer is getting a virus right now.
Yeah, it is bad web design for sure.
And quite frankly, his business, United Nuclear, that's it's one of the things I kind of focused on when I was starting to have my doubts about Bob.
Right.
Not as a hole in his story, just as almost a hole in his character and his credibility. Because
interesting.
Bob, in what's known of his life, very little is known about his life outside of this story, but bits and pieces that are verifiable. And he's gotten himself into
Some trouble.
some trouble. And
Yeah.
United Nuclear is one of the things that got him into trouble. It was originally headquartered in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
He got kicked out of Las Vegas. He got kicked out of that state entirely
Oh.
because he sells lab
Yeah,
equipment.
and he sold stuff
And-
over state lines, right? This is where this is going?
Well, the problem was a lot of his lab equipment was finding its way into meth labs.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this piece.
And yeah, that got him into some trouble.
Right. Yeah, yeah. As it would.
He's gotten into some more trouble over the years. He was
Yeah,
he was prosecuted and pled guilty in a prostitution ring.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just keep this in mind. Like it doesn't say anything about that doesn't point to anything in his story one way or the other. But
No, I agree. Yeah.
it tells you a little something about his character. Now maybe Bob maybe he's just kind of clueless and he has poor judgment in who he deals with.
Yeah. Well, and like the whole prostitution scandal, like I researched up on that, and yeah, that's one of those things where you go, "What the hell?" It makes you raise an eyebrow, and that was very shortly after he came out. That was just in a couple of years following him coming out as a whistleblower. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that probably had more, at least from my interpretation of kind of watching his story, that he was probably in a really bad place. He was paranoid. He was carrying an Uzi with him everywhere he went.
Yeah.
He felt like he was being watched by the government. The whole reason he came out in the first place is because he thought he was going to be killed, basically, because he had gotten into some trouble at the base, because he was taking friends out to the adjacent kind of mountain range across from Parapost Lake, because he knew the flight test schedule. So he was taking his buddies out there
to watch the test
to
flights.
have beers and watch test flights of these UFOs, and he got caught.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately led him to coming out as a whistleblower, because he was terrified he was going to be killed.
Yeah, because after he was caught, being careless and taking his friends out to witness these test flights, he lost his job at S4.
Yeah.
But beyond that,
And he found out his wife was having an affair,
yes,
because they revealed that to him. When he got caught bringing his friends out to the test range, he got in big trouble. He got interrogated on the base, and because they were monitoring his home phone lines, he didn't know his wife was having an affair. She thought he was having an affair because he's disappearing all the time randomly, going to work at S4.
and that was, he says that was part of the reason he started taking people up to S4 to witness these test flights, is because he could sense things were not going so well between him and his wife, and he kind of wanted to reveal to someone, to her, to his friends, what he was doing with his time and why he had to be so secretive. But anyway, he got found out.
Yeah,
and
not good.
And he was kicked out of that program. But beyond that, they started following him, they started intimidating him, and he felt very threatened, and he felt like
and you know what I suspected, and just sorry to interrupt you, but just something that occurred to me, because it was like, why would they let him go? You would think if you just got caught introducing a bunch of civilians to what your work is on this base, how did he even survive that, right? Why did they let him go? But they dragged him in, they interrogated him, and they intentionally chose that moment to reveal to him that his wife was cheating on him, down to the detail of providing transcripts of phone calls. I think they were looking at him saying, he's off the rails, he's unstable, we're going to hit him with this blow of news, and he's going to go home and take care of the problem himself. He's going to go off himself. That's what I think they were. And then, no problem. Their problem goes away. Right?
Possibly. Possibly.
That's how, when I look at it, that's the first thing that occurred to me, is that's how they thought this was going to go down. And he took this crazy left Bob Lazar turn and did something completely different, which was go to the news, you know?
Yeah. See, my thoughts on why, why didn't they just kill him? Why would they let him go?
Yeah.
And that is like, okay, we've caught him, exposing all this very sensitive stuff to people.
Yeah.
Who knows who else he's told? It would look very suspicious if he suddenly disappeared or was killed. It would look very incriminating if that were to happen.
Right. Suicide.
And
not so much.
This is a low-level guy, and again, there are more holes in the man's credibility than there are in his story. This is a guy who's a risk taker. He gets himself into trouble. Crazy rocket car man in the news is telling crazy stories.
Yeah.
Who's going to believe him?
Right.
It would look more suspicious if, crazy rocket car man was telling crazy stories and then abruptly died.
Yeah.
That looks more suspicious.
Right. Okay.
So I think they were kind of angling, there's enough holes in his credibility that people are going to doubt this. And if
interesting take.
If anything were to happen to him,
Yeah.
it's almost a confirmation.
I take your point, but I do look at those couple of years after he came out as a whistleblower, where all of a sudden he got very famous for coming out as a whistleblower. There was a lot of media attention on him, but there was also a lot of supposed government harassment. And obviously his life the life he knew had completely fallen apart and changed. So I tend to kind of look past that. Okay, so he was off the rails. He's carrying an Uzi everywhere he goes. He weirdly got mixed up in some prostitution ring, or what was it? It was basically like he was an investor in a bordello or something.
It's not
right?
like he wasn't. This is why I say maybe the man just had some poor judgment in his dealings with people.
Yeah,
because,
and if you consider his state of mind, like, I don't find it that surprising. And I don't look at it as something that necessarily damages.
He wasn't an investor. At the time, he was running, I think he was running a film development business.
Right.
And he somehow got himself involved through people he knew in this escort agency.
Right.
And
basically
his role there was setting up cameras.
Right.
To catch people in compromising situations.
Right.
To be later used as blackmail. He was the camera guy. He set up hidden cameras.
Right.
That was his entire role.
But from the technical perspective.
Yeah.
So it's funny. That's interesting, because there's that, and then there's the mess stuff. And the most recent thing with United Nuclear was, they got into trouble. The whole, if anybody's seen the Jeremy Corbell documentary that was done about Bob Lazar from 2017, I believe it came out. Bob's business, United Nuclear, gets raided at the very beginning of the movie. There's a little sequence, and they get to it. They circle back to it later in the episode. And apparently that raid, they play it off in the documentary as he's being harassed by the FBI, and they're looking for element 115, which he's supposedly stole from the base before he left. But the official line I learned on that raid was that there had been I forget the name of it now, and that's why I really need to make sure I have my tabs open before doing an episode. But there's a particular chemical substance that somebody had purchased off his website that is quite toxic, and it was basically used to poison somebody, and it was determined that he had sold it to this person. It seems there's no other connection, but obviously there's a murder investigation. And they were raiding the office for his, the sales receipts and the paper trail connecting the sale of this poison and connecting it to this murder case, which he was not charged with anything. Ultimately, it seemed like there really was no connection. Obviously, people buy stuff online. He doesn't know what they're buying it for, but there is that little tidbit to it.
Again, could just be a guy, Bob, exercising poor judgment in his
because maybe he shouldn't be
he
shouldn't be selling that sort of thing.
He runs a business where he sells lab equipment, also chemicals. I don't know all the details, but some of the stuff he's selling probably has some sort of regulation around it.
Yeah.
And as a seller, you bear a certain degree of responsibility.
Yeah.
It's like selling alcohol, or anything. You bear a certain level of responsibility as a point of contact.
Yeah.
In what happens after that transaction.
Yeah. If you're at the liquor store, say you're at the till of a liquor store, and somebody comes in, falling over and obviously already completely inebriated, you don't go and sell to them, right?
Yeah, because then you are responsible for what transpires after that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's reasonable. Whether he's actually guilty of any wrongdoing in any of these circumstances, I mean, obviously there are some convictions and some things have happened, consequences in his life. Mm-hmm. But just from watching a ton of content with him, he does seem to have a close network of friends and family. He doesn't come across as, what's the guy from Breaking Bad? Walter White. He doesn't come across like that at all, or a sketchy person. He seems like a pretty genuinely open and warm, well-intentioned human being to me.
He does. When you watch him, he seems very genuine and very reluctant in to a degree to even be talking about this at all.
Yeah. Well, and he often refers to it in a light of look, I don't like talking about this stuff. It ruined my life. But he does because people badger him so much. Yeah. And he does ultimately want this truth to be out there. One of the things, just to take a sidestep, something I found interesting watching interviews and doing research this week was what he regrets. And I was thinking about, because I did send that email, knowing full well I probably wasn't going to hear anything. But it was a fun exercise for me at the beginning of the week to write an email inviting him to come for an interview. And then as I was doing research the rest of my week, trying to come up, if a miracle fell out of the sky and I actually got a response and he said yes, what the fuck would I ask him? What would my questions be? Mm. And that was just a fun mental exercise for me to play with myself throughout the week. But one thing I kept going back to as a question would be, okay, it's been 35 years since this all went down. You're a smart guy. You supposedly, air quotes, supposedly stole some element 115, which I don't think we've clarified for anybody yet. For context, is the fuel that the antimatter reactor of the spaceship he was working on was fueled by. Supposedly he has some of it. Has he continued to work on it over 35 years? Has he made any progress? Has he, even just as a thought experiment, say he doesn't have any? You've been exposed to this stuff. You've seen the technology. He's a curious, risk-taker guy, like you say. And that seems to be one of his biggest regrets, is that there's part of him that regrets that he screwed it up and left, and that he's not still able to work on this stuff. But he's got the knowledge and experience, and if he's got a bit of the material, wouldn't you keep experimenting? Wouldn't you keep playing with it?
I think I've listened to Bob talk, and he says his biggest regret is he screwed up, and he wishes he could still be part of that program.
Yeah,
because he felt like he just got his foot in the door.
Yeah,
and he was just getting a taste of
he just got a peek. Yeah,
and
into this whole other world, right?
And he screwed it up, and he was just the door was slammed in his face. And he says the only part of the spacecraft I was actually able to figure out was the door.
Yeah, the hatch. Yeah.
They only figure out,
Or what? It was the hatch into the kind of underbelly where the gravitational projectors were recessed. Yeah.
It's the only part of it he looked at, and he's like, "Yes, I know how this works. We can
replicate this. Yeah, but everything else was completely foreign.
Is he has diagrams and sketches and theories about how it works, but nothing concrete. And element 115, it's
okay. So I know you dug deep into this.
Yeah, this is where I got really
So tell me about this.
distracted.
Unum Pentium.
Unum Pentium was the original placeholder name. So at the time he was telling his story, there was no element 115. The periodic table didn't go up that high.
Yeah.
It
does now.
And this is one of those things people argue about. Oh, Bob Lazar predicted the existence of element 115. Oh, now we have
It's
element
not how
115.
it works. Yeah.
Well, no, you can just say a number. Like you can in theory just keep adding protons onto an atom and keep increasing that atomic number.
Yeah, it just refers to the
theory,
atomic weight. Yeah.
So no, Bob Lazar didn't necessarily predict anything, but when he said this, we didn't have an element 115. We do now. For years it was just theoretical, and it was known as Unum Pentium. It was finally synthesized in Russia in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2003. Its official name has now been changed to Moscovium.
Yep.
Because first synthesized in the region of Moscow.
Now, and you say it was synthesized, but my understanding, it was like for milliseconds it existed.
Yes.
It's kind of those things where we were able to synthesize it and it immediately blinked out of existence or destroyed itself.
Yeah, Bob Lazar claims that the reactor of this craft he works on contains a fuel rod of stable element 115. Now, element 115 in real life has a half-life of 0.65 seconds.
Okay.
It's extremely radioactive. 0.65 seconds, it'll decay into some other element. And Bob Lazar has actually responded to this. He said, no, someday it is possible to create a stable isotope of element 115. We just don't have the science to stabilize it yet.
Yeah.
So I said, well, that's interesting. So
that sounds to my layman ears fairly reasonable.
Yeah. And actually that 0.65 seconds, that is the most stable isotope we've synthesized of element 115.
Right.
On their first go at it, it lasted for a few millionths of a second.
Wow.
Before it decayed. So 0.65 seconds, that's as stable as we can get it. Now, from previous talks on this show, I like to fiddle around with AI.
Yes. Yep.
So I decided I would point AI at this problem because I don't know if you've heard, AI is actually making a lot of advances in material science.
Right. Okay.
It's actually it's helping out a lot with material science. There's all sorts of new stuff in the pipeline now. All sorts of crazy new tech in the pipeline now that is because of AI.
Yeah.
AI sped up the material science by 1,000%.
Yeah.
So,
and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure we'll see all kinds of industries skyrocketing into new territory as a result of AI. But anyway, go on.
So, this took me down a weird rabbit hole. So I was asking, just Chat GPT. I said, in theory, if there was a stable isotope of element 115, Moscovium, what would its properties be?
Okay.
And I was expecting something more exciting Like, oh,
Right.
it would have anti-gravity properties, and it would be like some sort of weird futuristic memory metal. I didn't get any of that.
Okay.
I said,
What did you
well,
get?
in theory, it would be a super dense metal that would be solid at room temperature. It would likely have a dull grayish metallic color.
Okay.
It would probably look very similar to bismuth.
Right.
It would likely have a melting point at 400 degrees Celsius, a boiling point at 1100 degrees Celsius. I don't know
Does it
how
talk?
it came up with this.
Does it talk about its radioactive properties?
Yes, that's what I'm getting to.
Okay. Pardon.
Then it went on to kind of say, well, stable. That's all very relative.
Yeah.
Stable could mean for seconds, hours, days, years,
Yeah.
centuries. You could consider any of that stable. Said regardless of how stable it was, it would still be very radioactive.
Right.
Radioactive to a degree being toxic to humans.
All right.
I mean, all matter is radioactive
Yeah.
to some degree or another.
Yeah.
Iron is radioactive ever so slightly.
Yeah.
But it would be extremely radioactive. And that got me thinking, radioactive. That just triggered something in my mind.
Okay.
Like, what do you hear in so many stories of UFO sightings or alien abductions? You hear about radiation.
Yeah. You definitely do.
You hear about radioactivity.
People. Yeah.
Yeah.
If people end up in close proximity to craft in their accounts while it's operational, they usually end up dying of cancer or
Yeah.
being what is it, radiation sickness?
Yeah, and I immediately thought of Dyatlov Pass, which you should really do an episode of at some point. But again,
It's on the list.
Suspected UFO encounter,
Yeah.
and one of the big factors in that story is, the one of the final photos salvaged from the Dyatlov party was them taking photos of strange lights they were seeing in the sky, and
interesting.
their clothes were radioactive.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
Or
that
I'd
story
forgotten about it.
immediately came to mind, and I was saying, I wonder if there's a
connection.
correlation. I
Yeah.
started asking AI some questions. I said, is there a correlation between people who claim to be abducted by UFOs
Mm-hmm.
and cancer rates? Is there a correlation there? There's never been a study.
Of course.
There has
Of course.
never been a study conducted into that. So there's no empirical data there, but there's a great deal of anecdotal evidence of that. And
We might have to commission
I-
a study.
I just said that, well, that's pretty wild. So I started looking into, famous UFO abduction cases, and
And you said you felt underprepared for this
I
episode.
brought
This sounds like some excellent investigative journalism.
I brought up a whole list of famous UFO abductees, going back to the 50s.
Yeah.
And I looked up the cause of death of every single one.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, like some of it, there is no listed cause of death. This person is not famous enough that
Right.
information is available.
Okay.
But every known cause of death I could find,
It's cancer.
cancer or brain hemorrhage.
Oh, wow.
And do you know what one of the causes of brain hemorrhage is? Radiation. It's
Wow.
it's a delayed side effect of often radiation treatment is brain hemorrhage because it damages the blood
I
vessels
don't
in your
think
brain.
you're onto something here.
But every single one
You know what?
I could actually find a cause of death for was cancer or brain hemorrhage.
This could be a book. We're going to have to write a book about this now. Right? It sounds like you've already done like your own preliminary study of sorts, right?
But Betty and Barney Hill, how did Betty Hill die?
Cancer.
Cancer. Whitley Strieber, who's still alive, but his wife, who was in the house with him when
Yep.
he claims his abduction happened.
Yep.
Brain hemorrhage caused as a complication
Yeah.
of a brain tumor.
Right. Wow. That's good stuff.
But
excellent work.
Every single one, either cancer, brain hemorrhage.
All right. Well,
So
in connection to Bob Lazar, that I guess would lend as a piece of credibility. Although we have to ask ourselves if that aspect of his story is true, that he's has ownership.
yes, please lock that away somewhere, Bob.
Yeah, how
Buried
is
in the
he
desert.
containing it?
And maybe
Although-
this is why he hasn't worked on it.
Although maybe that's right. Maybe he just doesn't have the appropriate facilities to handle it. But maybe it's also encased in something, in a protective layer of something that mitigates the radioactive effects, so it can be handled easily. But that's just pure speculating.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of people argue so much about element 150. I was actually on Reddit. I was like on Ask Physics.
Yeah.
On Reddit, and I was reading this argument about element 115, and people get really passionate about element 115.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's why, and you know what, and I think why his story is so compelling. And in one aspect, you could say this is a really boring story because it's 35 years old and hasn't changed, right?
Yeah.
So part of my brain goes to, why are we still talking about it then? And it's because there isn't a definitive answer. And to be fair, Bob Lazar has provided no physical proof whatsoever. All we have is his say-so, right? And over 35 years, his story hasn't been embellished. It hasn't changed. He tells the same story with the same details pretty darn consistently for 35 years. And I found watching interviews, he's quick to say when he doesn't know something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
A lot of these other guys, you could say, just about anything, and they'll agree with you and fold it into their story. Where he's very fast to clarify, I don't know the answer to that question. This is what I do know for sure, and he's remarkably consistent. So to me, that lends a lot of credibility. And if what he's saying is true, the implications and consequences of that are so huge. Mm-hmm. That's world shattering, right? And there's definitely been some vindications, some tiny verifications of his story that have come out. Smaller details. Not smoking gun, anything, but in the Jeremy Corbell, did you catch this detail about the hand scanner?
Yes.
So he had a part of his story back when he told it back in 89 or 90
Mm-hmm.
that there was this very early biometric hand scanner that I guess would take an x-ray of your hand and read the length of your finger bones or whatever.
Yeah.
And at the time, everyone said that's science fiction, that doesn't exist. And it has now just recently come to light that this did exist and was used by the government in sensitive facilities as a form of early biometric identification, right? And there's been other little pieces like that have come out that lend him some credibility. So I wonder, especially with everything else we've discussed over the past couple of episodes of kind of details and more information starting to stack up, do you think we'll see a vindication of Bob Lazar in our lifetime where we could definitively say, yeah, his story is true. It's been true all along.
Well, maybe. I mean, I think the last episode I was here for, it was a perfect lead into this.
Well, that's why I wanted to go here.
Our last episode was, there's so much evidence stacking up of,
And
there's life in the galaxy.
And we didn't get to this pit. I said that on last episode. Is we never circled. We stayed out in the distant cosmos, and I regretted that we never circled into how does that relate to the UFO phenomenon of are they visiting us, right?
And Bob, part of what makes his story so compelling is, he's not like you said, he doesn't embellish. He's not trying to create a narrative of some sort of grand conspiracy.
And it's not ever expanding. He's not
like
adding
you said,
to it every
he's
time.
very consistent, and he's very clear on what he does not know. But his story does connect with some other stories out there in some very interesting and obscure ways. Again, going back to he's very clear on what he doesn't know. When he was being walked around, like he worked very specifically on one craft.
Yeah.
But he was shown all of them.
Yeah.
They were all
Didn't
in a
get to
hangar.
work on all of them,
Yeah.
but just
He was only allowed inside the one.
Yeah.
And but he saw the exteriors of the others, and I forget which one he was speaking. He has little nicknames for all of them.
Yeah.
But there was one he was being told about, and he was told that this one we retrieved from the Zeta Reticuli star system.
Yeah.
And he says, I have no idea where they're getting that information. I don't know how this was obtained.
Yeah, it's just something someone said to him.
But
yeah.
This is where it's originally from. This was where it was made. And that's very interesting.
Why is that interesting?
Betty and Barney Hill, one of the more famous UFO abduction cases.
Good point.
During their hypnosis sessions, Betty Hill drew a diagram of the Zeta Reticuli star system.
That's right.
And getting back to element 115,
yeah,
science doesn't have a way to create a stable version of element 115.
Yeah.
Could a star?
Oh.
See.
Oh, interesting.
See.
Because that's one of the theories is that element 115 could be created naturally because it's a heavy element.
Yeah.
And so could the Zeta Reticuli star system have naturally occurring element 115
because
in a stable form?
Going back in time,
yeah.
in the early universe, we started for a long time, the universe consisted of nothing but hydrogen and helium.
Yeah.
The two simplest elements. We didn't get those heavier elements until stars started forming. And fusing things together. That's all the other heavy elements were formed in stars. Now the reason like our natural periodic table, our naturally occurring elements on Earth, it goes up to 92.
Okay.
Which is uranium.
All right.
And everything beyond that, not everything, but basically when we try and synthesize elements heavier than that, they become less and less and less stable. Would something produced naturally in a star be more stable?
I don't know, Professor.
We go
Enlighten me.
we go up to uranium. We go up to uranium because I believe the sun is a third generation star.
All right.
A second generation star. The periodic table for whatever species might have lived around a second generation star, their periodic table might only go up to 50.
Right. Yeah.
And nothing beyond that occurs naturally on their world.
Yeah.
Now, think of a star like Zeta Reticuli.
All right.
Might Zeta Reticuli be a fourth generation star? Maybe elements that heavy occur naturally.
Yeah.
And that got me looking at Zeta Reticuli. And according to the analysis of the light spectrum.
Yeah.
Zeta Reticuli it's a binary star system. And both stars, Zeta Reticuli A and B, are said to be very metal deficient.
All right.
Possible cause for metal deficient stars: mass accretion.
Okay. So am I to take that they have already been through a nova once and have deposited all their heavy elements out into their system?
Exactly.
Oh. Okay.
So wouldn't that be the kind of place you'd look for naturally occurring heavy elements?
Whoa. Whoa!
If
They actually
if
talk.
anyone that's like an actual physicist is listening,
Yeah.
I
Go on
hope,
Reddit.
I hope I didn't like
Butcher that.
piss you off too much by completely butchering all the science.
It sounded good to me though. I'd buy that for $1. No, it sounds pretty compelling what you've done there. Excellent investigative research.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
So
All
I
right.
passed the audition then.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so what more do we have to say about Bob's story?
Well,
We're doing pretty good for time here.
in terms
if
of,
we left anything out.
is Bob gonna be vindicated?
Okay, well,
someday?
how about that? Beyond that, just you started this episode. You said you went back and forth. You had some trepidation. For me, I had the same, and definitely Bob has a lot of detractors, and even within the UFO, if not any, maybe especially in the UFO community, some people are very passionate that he's a fraud, he's a liar. Stanton Friedman was a big one.
Yeah.
Who really had horrible things to say about him,
Yes, he
gave
did.
him no credibility whatsoever. And I don't pretend to understand all the reasons why, but as far as I know, in a nutshell, he just thinks he's lying. And Stanton Friedman was a nuclear physicist, right? Also very interested in the UFO subject matter.
Yeah.
So definitely that makes me question as well. And definitely all this week, I think we've both been going back and forth and just trying to decide, trying to absorb all this information for what reason to decide whether we believe this guy or not. So now that we've had this conversation, what do you think? Can we believe him?
I'll say that I want to believe Bob, but I'm still on the fence.
Okay. For me, this is tough now that I'm facing with it. I thought I knew my answer. I think I tend to believe him. I watch him speak. I watch how he communicates his story, and as much color and interest. He's had definitely a very unique life path, but just on a gut level, trying to understand his character when I watch his interviews and watch him speak about this, I find him to be one of the very most credible whistleblowers and people with accounts on this subject matter that I've ever seen.
And I've watched people do like body language analysis of his interviews.
Yeah.
And across the board their conclusion is, well, true or not, he believes what he's saying.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, that's all we really have to go on with Bob, right? Is like I said, there's no hard evidence whatsoever, unless he turns around tomorrow and says, "Here's my pellet of element 115 that I've been hiding for 35 years." Until we have that, all we really have is his say-so, his account.
Yeah.
And if that's all we have to go on after 35 years of it being scrutinized and of him retelling the story, if we were just going on his character and his account, I say very highly credible. If I was in a jury listening to the court case, I would probably vote in his favor.
Just watch the guy talk. If he's an actor, he's a really good one.
Yeah, and very consistent.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think we're at a really good time. I just want to touch on one more thing. Okay, so I asked you when we were on the car ride over here, if in your research you happen to stumble across Project Gravitor.
No, I have not.
You've not heard of this?
No.
Okay, I think you're going to love this. This is basically just the most recent iteration of someone doing, a documentary, writing a book about Bob Lazar, but there's a really interesting angle to it that I think you're going to love. So I wish I had a clip up, but it started a couple years back initially as a movie and a book about Bob Lazar,
Okay.
where they wanted to use the most up-to-date kind of graphic rendering technology, and through close consultation with Bob Lazar, recreate the spacecraft and S4 facility so
Okay.
that so people could see it and see what Bob describes, right? To create a visceral pathway for people to experience that. So it's frustrating. I first heard of it back in 2023, and it still, if you go back to and it was supposed to be out early 2024. If you go to the website today, it still says coming soon without any more details. But I've seen some updates, whatever. I started looking at it again this week on YouTube. And supposedly they just invested more into the technology and the presentation to make it even better, right? They're kind of giving themselves more time to bake it fully. But what they're doing is they're releasing, in conjunction with their movie documentary, a VR experience
Oh.
of the S4 hangars, of the spacecraft. So you can walk into the facility yourself, walk the halls and laboratories of S4, go inside the spacecraft that Bob Lazar worked on, all based on his account, with him in close consultation, verifying everything along the way.
And I just bought a Quest.
And it looks fantastic, right? We're both into this world just recently of VR. We're both really enjoying it. It's an amazing way to experience things on a more visceral level. And honestly, I remember seeing this, like a preview of this, or a YouTube video about it a couple years ago, and thinking, "Oh, damn, I might have to buy a headset just for that," because I think that would be such a transformative experience to, to really step inside the hangar bay, to see the spacecraft, to get in there.
Yeah, I
think
I
that
can't wait
sounds
to check
so
this
cool.
out.
It sounds so cool. Okay, I'll forward you the link after the show and I'll put it in the show notes, so everyone will be able to find it. I think it's so cool. I can't wait for it to come out. It's killing me that they're keeping us in this limbo of coming soon. But there was an update just 3 months ago where it sounds like it's coming close to being. It's a really cool trailer where they rent like a DeLorean, and they have him driving, Bob Lazar behind the wheel of the Back to the Future time machine, driving, through the desert flats. It's really, I guess, I don't know. I found it cool.
Yeah, I have to check this out.
Yeah, I think you're gonna love it. And it looks like a really cool take on how to keep his story interesting. Let's step inside his experience, and the way the producers talk about it is all like, like it was a really cool experience from Bob's perspective to see those memories.
Oh, no doubt.
Recreated in such excellent quality.
Yeah.
That for him was really confronting and validating.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really cool project. I can't wait to see it. I'm eagerly awaiting that coming out. I think it's going to be real cool.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so I think we can call it a wrap. We're at a really good time, and I kind of got to pee. So do you have any final thoughts, co-host?
Yeah, Bob.
I've got your contract ready here.
Bob,
Sign on the dotted line.
if you're out there and you just maybe didn't look at your emails this week,
You missed the opportunity of a lifetime.
call us. Have
Yeah.
your people call our people.
Yeah. If this show has any longevity, I'm sure we will revisit the topic. And
Yeah.
of course, you'd always be welcome on.
Yeah, like I said, I kind of got deep into this week, and there's so much there. No matter how
Yeah.
how many notes I took on this, I was gonna feel underprepared.
Yeah. There's so many cool little details to kind of parse out. And yeah, we barely scratched the surface. Like I definitely was curious about the whole archaeological dig. and where one of these supposed spacecraft was found. I thought that's an interesting angle to explore. We never got there, but that's okay. I think we covered it pretty well, and yeah, some really great work on your end. I think you got some interesting angles there. Stuff I've been watching documentaries and interviews all week. No one's taken that angle, so thank you. That's really good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, and thank you everyone for joining us for another week. I'm not sure exactly when this audio will come out. Another close friend of mine has volunteered to take a look at it. He's kind of an expert with audio and has some really nice software, and he graciously volunteered to take our file of our episode this week and clean it up and make it try and sound a little nicer. But I'm not sure how long it'll take him to do it. So I might even release the episode and just update it. You might have to listen to it twice. Wouldn't that be a thing? But anyway, so whenever you're hearing this, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you again for episode 8. Good night.